In this course, we will be building a machine learning model that helps us in predicting attrition among employees, hence the name attrition rate. What is attrition? Now, from your point of view, it may look like fickle, but for an employer, it is quite useful. So let's understand what attrition is. A common attrition rate definition refers to employee or staff turnover, but in a broader sense, attrition rate is a calculation of the number of individuals that move out of a larger collective group. You can say that a collective group can be an organization, a company, a NGO, etc. A term that is often used by human resource professionals to determine a company's ability to retain employees. Now, details of the project. The project is divided into three parts: building a machine learning model to predict attrition among employees. We build a web app on Django to mount the prediction model. Lastly, we deploy the Django project on Heroku through GitHub. Now we come to the first part, that is machine learning model building. So we start off with building a machine learning model. We actually use three classes that are logistic regression, random forest, and knife-based classifiers. And then we train those models using the attrition rate dataset, which has 900 data points. Now the second part is Django web app. So this is the part where we're building a web application using the framework Django. We mount the model we build in the first part here. Now this is the last part, that is deploying our web app on Heroku. So we will be deploying our Django application on Heroku using the connections to GitHub. Now I will be telling you exactly how I'm going to do this, and that will be covered in the third part of the course. Now we start off with the first part, that is building our ML model for attrition prediction. This is the first part of the course where we pre-process our data and build our prediction model. First, we are importing the libraries, and you can see libraries like Pandas, NumPy, and Matplotlib, which are going to use for data handling and data manipulation. Next, you can see the train test split function to help us prepare our training and testing data. It comes under the model selection class, and that is inside the Scikit-Learn package. Now the last is accuracy score. This function is used to determine the accuracy of our model, which we will be using in the last. Now the next thing you can see is the import function. That is actually I'm trying to mount my drive, or actually the storage of my drive, to the Google Colab. So you need to run this function here. Now the next thing I'm doing is using the read CSV function and giving it the path where my dataset is present. Now I'm collecting the data and then using the head function to see the first 5 data points in my dataset. And you can see that there are some columns and showing like phone number, location, employee group, function, and there are some other columns, and it might happen that you won't be able to understand some of the columns, and I will specify them so that you are able to. So the first thing you can see here is an employee group function. Now this is a group, or maybe you can call this as a categorical data, where the mass, or I should say the whole of my employees, are divided into 7 categories ranging from B1 to B7. Now, according to their work, according to their designation, they are categorized in B7 or maybe B3 and likewise. The next thing is the function column where operation support, and there's one more value that I'm not able to recognize, is actually present. So this is pretty much clear. I mean, like, yeah, there's, oh yeah, I remember sales. So there's operation, there's support, and there's sales. You know, like a salesperson, maybe someone in the support, like customer care, in operations, maybe working in the organization to build something new, stuff like that. And then comes the tenure group and experience, meaning how much experience they have gained or how much time they have allotted to work in that specific domain. Then it's marital status, age, hiring source, if they were promoted or not, job role match. Now, this is a little important column to see. You can see that the job role match is basically telling me if the person that was hired actually wanted this job, or maybe if the person which had some specific skills has been able to use those skills on the job, and it has a value of yes or no. Now the last column is stay or left, telling me if this employee, let's say one, which is named Sid. Okay, I can see there are a lot of Sids there. So if this first Sid left the company or if he stayed. So from this you can understand that this is our target variable. Now let's go ahead. Yeah. So the next thing we are doing is exploratory data analysis. That is EDA. You can see that I've used the function drop. So drop is basically a function which is used when you want to, directly drop a whole column, maybe a number of columns from your data set. Now I'm dropping the 0th column. You can see I have specified 0. And the 0th is indicating this table ID. So this table ID won't be helping me in any way. Thus, I'm actually dropping this. The next thing you can see is your is null function and a sum function. Now is null function is telling me how many null values are present inside each of my column, and dot sum function is basically calculating the sum of all the null values. Let's say there are two null values in my you can see job role match. So what it is doing is finding out which two values were the null values, and this sum value is counting that yeah, two values were present which had null in them. So you can see that most of them have 0, meaning we won't have to do much of the null imputations. We are handling null values. Okay, there's only 4 in experience and 2 in job role match. So what I'm doing is, since there are so less values having null values, I'm just simply dropping them. So you can see that axis 0 is telling me that yeah, I have to go in row, or let's say by row by row, and then delete those rows which have a null value. Now just for validation, I'm checking if there's any null value present, and you can see that there is none. The next thing I'm using is a dot shape function, which is telling me how many data points I have and how many columns I have. So I have 895 data points, meaning 895 rows and 16 columns. Now at this point, I want you to understand really what is happening and why I'm using this value counts, why I'm trying to understand how many type of data are present in my columns and what to do with it. So the first column that I have taken is gender, and this value counts function is basically telling me that yeah, in your gender function, gender column, there are 3 values and each value has been repeated this many times. So in my gender column, I have 655 male values and there's total of 895. So you can see that 655 times male was the value present in the gender column. The rest was female and others. Yeah, others are very less. So the next thing is I'm looking at the promoted, non-promoted column. Now it is pretty clear either you are promoted or you're not promoted. So there's only two values present. And yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that these type of data, where only three, four, maybe five, six data points are present and they are being repeated inside the whole data set. These are categorical data types and they are very important data because they have hidden data inside of it, which if extracted helps the model generalizing well and increases the prediction power of the model. This is why I'm actually emphasizing on these type of columns which have categorical data in them. Now the next column is function. Again, you can see there's three data present and each of them has been repeated this many times. Similarly, for hiring source, marital status, and employee group, yeah, you can see B1 to B7. Okay, there's D2 and C3 also, which I forgot to mention above. So you can see that how many times they have occurred. Okay, similar for job role match, tenure group, and location also. Yeah, so in location, see, I haven't printed the location data points, but after looking at it, I realized that there were this many data points present with this number of sorry, not this number of times. Okay, yeah, you can see I have my location column which has Chennai for 255 times, then Noida, Bangalore, Hyderabad. These all are places, okay, where the person or the employee might have been living. So what I did is I converted this data, or let's say this column, into a new one where if a Chennai is present, let's say there's a nth data point, okay, which has an employee named Adam and he's living in Chennai. So what will happen rather than Chennai, we will be writing 7. So this is what I have done. I made a new dictionary where Chennai is represented by 7, Noida by 6, Bangalore by 5, and likewise. Now why I have done this is because now my data set has integer values in it rather than string values. And now my model will be able to understand integer values. So this is the type of, actually this doesn't come under exploratory data analysis, but under feature engineering. So you can say that, yeah, this is a method of feature engineering. Of course, this is not an generalized method. I have done this according to my own wish because this works well in this column. You can imply any other method that you would want to convert this Chennai, Noida, or maybe other places to something else. Now the next part is location. Okay, yeah, so just as you see, I've changed this data type into a different data type now. This string has converted into a int type. Now what I'm doing is actually replacing all the string in my data set with numbers. So you can see that we have a location here, okay, which is showing, yeah, the strings that were present before. And now my data set has a new column named new location, which has integers in it. Now what I will do is let it stay here and this location will be deleted because there's redundancy now. Now the next thing I'm doing is, okay, yeah, another very important function has been showcased here, which is get dummies. So what does get dummies do? This is a function which you will be seeing a lot for categorical data types because what this function does is it is also used under feature engineering. So what this do is it takes your categorical data and outputs a number of columns using that categorical data. Now let me show you an example, because actually looking at the example, you would be better understanding what get dummies is doing. So the same thing I'm doing for hiring sources. Just see what I'm doing and it would be pretty clear. Yeah, so man, I didn't change the dataset here. Let me show you. Yeah, maybe attached the above get dummies. You can see that there's a new function named concat. So what this do is actually takes in two data set, actually takes in two data frames and attaches the second data frame onto the first. Now you can see that there are 40 columns now. We started with 17, no, right, 16. So a lot of columns have been added now. So you can see that there are operation, sales, support, female, male, other. These kinds of columns were not present in the dataset before. These are the columns that we have added using the get dummies function. Now you can see that if I go above, a lot above actually, so you can see, yeah, you can see the function and hiring source have been, inputted into the get dummies. Similarly, you can see that new marital is a new column that I made is also given to get dummies, so that it would extract my categorical data and give me a better, better, more standardized data that can be used to train my model. And yeah, I would come at this part later on and make you understand what I have been doing here. But just understand that all of that get dummies is giving me, uh, yeah, so all of that get dummies is giving me new columns where you can see that for, let's say, operation, sales, and support. These were actually my, categorical data present in functions. And you can see that for a row, it is giving me 0 at operation, 0 at sales, and 1 at support. What does this mean? So this means that this person that is said actually was in support, his function was in support. So it is giving me 1 here and 0 for both operation and sales. Next, you can see there's a 1 for operation, meaning that second data point had operation in it. So it is identifying with operation, and the next sales and support are both 0. Similarly, it is done for female, male, other, which was my, gender column. And you can see some more columns that I have made using other old columns. Okay, so let me go above and showcase some of the other ways that I have been, handling categorical data. Now see this, and this is an employee group which has only B1, B2, B3 and others. Now see, when we first stated, we had B1, B2 till B7 and then C3 and D2 also. Okay, so there were a lot of columns here. Oh, sorry, there were a lot of categorical data here, right? And now you can see what I'm doing is I'm like compressing all of those categories into just B1, B2, B3 and other groups, meaning that B4 to B7, B C2, C3 and D2, all of them would just get inside my other group category. So why I'm doing this is because, as I told you, get function just expands your, categorical data into new columns. So if I had let it stay as it is, I would have B1 to B7 and then two more columns, meaning there would be at least 9 to 10 columns that would have been just attached into my old data set. And now I already have a, I already have 40, where did it go? I already have a 40 column data set, and now 10 plus would, make it 50, which is a lot bigger than from what we started. So that's why I compressed it. Okay. Now I'm using a self-made function. What it is doing is that it is finding all of the date categories, and if there is a category like B1 in my row, like let's say for this one it is B7. Now you can see that B7 is not present here. So it means B7 will be categorized as other group. Next, it is looking at B3. Okay, so we have B3. So B3 is present in my new dictionary. Yeah, B3 is present. So what will happen? 2 will be replaced with B3. And similarly for other B2, B1 and so on. Now you can see, yeah, you can see I have a new employee column which has other group for B7, B3 is B3 is it as it is, B2, B2, similar for others. Next, I did the same thing with job role, but except here, since we had only two values, yes or no, I just converted it into 1 and 0. Now there are better methods to, do this conversion. Since I was, going in flow, I just simply built my own function and used it using the apply function. Now this is an important function which is present in Pandas library. Now we have three functions: apply, okay, apply map and map. Now these functions are used to manipulate data, actually used to manipulate each of the data inside my data frame. So what it takes is actually a name of your or reference of your function, and what this apply does is it takes in this column name job role match and applies this job function to each of the value. So my job role match here, it would apply the job function to no, then to yes, and so on for each of the column, sorry, each of the row. Now we go to gender. Yeah, I did the same thing with gender as I did before with employee groups. And again, I used my apply function and gave it another function named gen, which I have defined here. I've already explained all of this part. Yeah, for people who are not understanding what this axis is equal to 1 means, it is basically telling the concat function that you have to look at all of these column wise, not row wise. So for 1 meaning column. Now you can see that I've listed out all the columns in my data set now, and it has so many columns now. So now what I'm doing is the last part that happens, which is feature selection. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that my ED and feature, engineering actually kind of got merged, and the result is that. But mostly, people actually do both of them in hand. It depends, on person to person. Sometimes people just do EDA first and understand all of the data, then they go on to feature, engineering. But sometimes when the data is small, there's not much complexity in it. Both of the first EDA and feature engineering are done, in one go. Next, you can see that I am again using the drop function. Now I'm not specifying the index of the column. I'm just directly telling the column name. Again, this axis is equal to 1 is for column, and this in place is equal to true is telling the drop function to do not change the index for each of the rows while deleting. Though this is going by column, sometimes index gets interchanged or replaced. So this is for that. Now you can see that my data set columns are very less as compared to all of this. Okay, then Okay, so this is a simple code that is telling to just, the data that I have now pre-processed and used feature engineering and feature selection on, to save it. So 2 underscore CSV is like saving this data set as a CSV file. So I've just saved the data set, for maybe using it again later on. Now we're coming at our main, what should I say, main dish, where we're building our model for prediction. So I've set my y, that is target variable here, and yeah, so I've set my target variable here. Then I've dropped the target variable from my data set, then used my train test split function, giving it a test size of 0.2, meaning that 20% of the data, whole data set, would go as test data and the rest would go as training data. And random state is equal to 4 is just telling that before you just directly fit the X train with all the data set, just shuffle the data set. Now you can see that X train has all of these values, and you can see that even the data is shuffled from the indexes, and it has 716 rows with 24 columns. Now importing my bulk of my classifiers, that are decision tree classifier, random forest classifier, my knife based classifier, and logistic regression model. Yeah, so I'm now giving my variable the logistic regression basic. Yeah, so these are the hyperparameters, and though I haven't tuned the hyperparameters as such, you can tune the hyperparameters to even get a better predicting accuracy, or maybe a better predicting power. So what I did here is basically zip the variables with their name, and now I'm training all of the models and see which has the highest prediction power. And you can see my logistic regression training and testing accuracy, similarly decision tree training and testing, knife Bayes and random forest. One thing of note is that you can see that for decision tree training accuracy, it is showing me 1, meaning it didn't classify one of my target variable as wrong. Similarly for random forest. But when you see the testing accuracy, both goes at 84 and 88. Yeah, random forest is doing a little better than decision tree. But this is a basic example of overfitting. Now, there are some ways you can avoid overfitting, which is first of all, maybe dumb down your data set, meaning keep some of the columns out of your data set which don't help much, so that your data set has become a little less complex for the model to understand. Or what you can do is use regularization. Yes, regularization. Yes, or maybe standardization. So what both of these functions do is, one actually helps in making the model more strict if it misclassifies in training. So it gives you a better accuracy. The second one actually helps in generalizing the model. Maybe I should say that it sets the dataset into a better format for model to understand. So I haven't actually used both of them because for me accuracy of 87, 88 is okay. So I'm actually using my logistic regression model rather than the random forest because it is overfitting and I don't want my model to overfit. And you can see that for training it is showing 89 and for test it is showing 87, which is close, meaning you know, there's no overfitting happening here. So I'm training my model and then I'm saving my model into a finalized model file so that I can use it in my next part of the course, which is developing a web app model using Django. So let's see in the second part of the course. Now This is the second part of the course where we will be building the web application, that is using Django as our backend. Now, before we move on to the code part, there are some steps to be followed, and let's see those. So you can see that there are 6 steps to be followed before you can start using this code or make changes according to you. The first part is just set up a directory where you will be keeping the code. For me, I've set up the directory named attrition rate. Now, now you can see that the second point is open your terminal or project IDE. Now, I have seen a lot of people using project IDE and I'm using one myself also. But you can be a person who is directly working with console. So if it is the case, then you would need to type in the command for the console. I'm just going to show if you have a IDE like PyCharm, then you can just go to your files, go to your settings, and through there go to your project. It has a project interpreter. That project interpreter is basically the environment for this project. Now see, I've already set up an environment for my project, but if you have not, you can just simply go to the settings button and then click on add. Now you can see that my environment has all of these packages, and I will tell you how to install all of these packages in one go. Now once you have made your environment, then so once you have made an environment, then you need to run a command, that is pip install requirements.txt. So what you have to do is, in the code, just go to your directory name my site. Now once you've entered here, so like once you have gone inside your my site uh, directory, see, there are some of the files present here. There are 2 directories more, attrition and my site, and there's some of the files named db.sqlite3, flow, manage.py, procfile, requirements, runtime. Now these procfile and runtime are to be generated when you are deploying. And this requirement.txt, if I open this, you can see that all of the packages that were downloaded in my environment or installed in my environment are present here. So what you have to do is just in your command line, write pip install requirements.txt. Once you enter and this command runs, it will download all the dependencies, that are all the packages, into your environment and set up all of the packages itself. Once you have done that, the next thing is to set up your Django project. Now Django project is set up using 2 commands. First is your python manage.py migrate. Now this is a command that is specific to Django, not Python. And once you run this command, what Django understands is that there's a project, it has some database, and all of the database tables are to be created and set up for this Django account or this Django project. So once you do this, all of the tables that were to be used by Django are now created and kept. The second command is python.manage.py run server. So what this command does is basically locally starts a server on your laptop or maybe your computer, and then you can see that it's starting up the server locally, and it would give you a URL through which you can access the Django based website. Okay, it's taking a little time. Yeah, you can see there's a development server, and the URL is present here. Now if you click on it, it would take you to the site. and it's showing me an error, but don't worry, it's not actually an error because there is no URL setup for just this part. If you add show iteration, you can see there's a form present here. So you can just fill in this form, and once confirm submission, it would tell you the prediction. So this is the part or how you can set up your Django based web application. But before I move forward, there's two things to be noticed here. That is attrition and this my site directories. So first of all, it's not like Django just you know serves you on a platter all of its project and all of its directory already managed and stuff. Yeah, it does a lot of hand holding, but still you have to code and set up the project itself beforehand. So how can you do that? So there are two commands. One is Django admin start project. So once you put this command and give a name, let's say my site itself. So what this code does is basically it would create a project name my site, which has my site directory, DB, and some of the external libraries from your uh, environment.txt. Sorry, environment project of the environment. Yeah. Now Django admin start project just builds a project. Okay. But if you want to make an app or let's say a sub project inside your project, then you can run the command python manage.py start app. Okay. And the name of the app, let's say tools. So now you can, run this command and then it will create a app like this app here. This iteration is actually an app and it would give you a migrations folder, init file, admin file, app file, models, test, UR, not URLs, views. This URLs was created by me, and this again finalized is the model that we built in our last session. So both of these are how you can build and project an app. Okay. Now let's move forward to views. So views is the implementation in Django where you can render your templates that are your HTML, CSS files, or let's say that the backend work which happens, in the backend, all the computations or maybe all the data manipulation, all of that happens in views itself. So it has two things. First, you build a function inside which you can, have your data manipulation, maybe, render your templates. And for rendering your template, you have to write a code like return and use the render function and then give your HTML file as an input with the context. Now, for people who have little bit understanding in web applications or maybe web development, would know about your templates, your rendering, and your context. Context is basically extra data that I have to send from my backend to my front end. That is my HTML, let's say an HTML template. So this function is rendering and storing all of the data that is coming from my forms that I just showed you. You can see that person's name, location, gender, tenure group, everything is coming from my front end here, and I'm storing them in my variables, sending them to a finder function that I have built, which is using the pickle model for prediction. See, the finder function that I have made is taking on all of that data, putting it into a data frame, and then you can see that I'm loading my pickle file and predicting. And once prediction is being done, I'm returning the data to my iteration rate finder function and then sending that data as context to my front end. And this is the front end. This is a very basic forms You can use CSS and style it, since this just a basic form having no style at all since I'm not that good at it. So you can just simply use CSS, maybe JavaScript if you want to, and through that maybe beautify it. So this was the second part where you understand how to build a web application and how to input and output your data from your front end to back end and vice versa. Now with this, we end the second part and go on to the third part, that is deploying this web application to Heroku. And that is where I'm going to specify what this proc file and what this runtime.txt is, and why actually creating a requirement.txt is a must before you go on and to deploy your app on Heroku. This is the third part of the course where we will be deploying our web application model on Heroku. So before we start with Heroku, we have to understand and use some of the files which are like the commands for Heroku to understand and attach or deploy our code with the server. Let's start with runtime.txt and proc file. So runtime.txt is basically just telling Heroku which language or which base is it is to use when the server is getting set up. So we have defined Python with the version. Now the second file is proc file. So proc file is the mechanism for declaring what commands are run by your application in Heroku platform. The commands that I specified in last part in our Django application, like the manage.py run server or maybe manage.py migrate, these commands are actually executed in Heroku's server using the proc file. So you can see that there is a G unicorn specified telling that use the mysite.wsgi Python file and run those commands. So when these two are actually made and set up, then we can go for our Heroku deployment. Last thing that sometimes goes unnoticed is that in your project settings.py file, always try to see if your debug is in true or false mode. Now you can see that there is a security warning also saying don't run with debug turned on in production, meaning when deploying. So you have to change the value to false here. Once you have done that, you might be noticing that, yeah, my God, what is this? Yeah, so where did this come from? iterationonly.herokuapp.com. So I will tell you where this has actually come from and why this has to be specified here. So let's go to the Heroku. Yeah. So you can see that this is my GitHub, and once you have actually made your Django backend or Django application, you have to upload that in your one of the repositories inside your GitHub account. So once the repo is finalized and you have made the changes, what you can do is go to your Heroku. If you haven't made an account, just make an account. It asks for really less information and it's easy to make one. And then the next step would be on your dashboard. In the top right corner, you can see there's a new telling you to create a new app. So you can put any name here. Okay, so it's telling me that yeah, I can keep my app name here, whatever, and just create an app. So I won't be actually creating a new app since I've already made one. But once you make a new app, it would be showing in your dashboard, and through the dashboard, go inside the app, and you can see that there is giving me some options, like settings, access, metric deploy, stuff like that. So first of all, go into your settings. Now, once you go into your settings, you can see build packs. So like Heroku, has to understand that your backend is actually in Python language. So you have to add a build pack. And inside build pack, you can see the Python. So select Python and save changes. So I've already done that. So it's showing me Heroku/Python build pack is already installed or used. Then the next thing is you open app. So click on the open app button and it will show you. Okay, it's loading. It's taking too much time. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you can see that this link is being shown here. So you just have to copy this link and maybe go to your repo and go inside your Python, settings.py and just change the value or insert the value here. So I've already done that. If you haven't done, you can, change it now. So once you have changed it and the GitHub has, updated that change, you go back and now go for the deploy. So once you go for deploy, it is going to give you three options for deployment method. The first is Heroku Git. So you can use the Heroku CLI, the Heroku client, and directly run commands to upload and deploy your code. The second method is using GitHub Connect. So what this is actually is basically asking you to connect your GitHub account with your Heroku account. So you can see that it has connected my GitHub account here with the Heroku, and now it's accessing my only iteration repository. So you can see that I already have a disconnect option. Since you would be doing this for the first time, you would get a connect option here, and after that it will ask for your credentials. Once you fill in that, your GitHub and Heroku would be connected. Now we go for the last part, that is manual deploy. So you choose your branch, from which branch do you want to use the code. And since my the updated branch is final branch, I'm going to choose final and then I'm going to click on deploy. Now this might take some time because this is doing a lot of stuff which I'm going to explain now. So the first thing it does is it sees that yeah, Heroku Python build pack is to be used, and from runtime.txt it understands which Python version is to be used. Now it has installed the Python. Oh my god. Yeah, so it has installed the Python version and now it's going for the requirements. So it's starting with requirements.txt and it will install all of the packages dependencies that you have specified in your requirement.txt. Once it does that, it runs a command called collect static, which does this is that it actually takes in all of your static files that might have been digressed from one place to another and collects it and puts it into your static files directory, that which we had uh, specified in our settings.py. Now you can see that it has done all of its work, and if there's no problem it would simply tell you to deploy to Heroku is successful. I can click on the view button and it would load your web application. Now you can see there's an error, but this is not actually an error because my URL doesn't specify any page for this particular URL. Once you write show iteration, you can see the iteration form that can be filled up now, and once filling up you can confirm submission, and then your result would be specified in the last of this page, where it will tell you if this person will it write or not? So with this, we come to the last part, that was our deploying to Heroku, which is now finished. And if there's been any, let's say there's some error that comes before deploying to Heroku, you can see that going through more and view logs. So you can see that it gives you a log of all the request and responses that this server is handling, and through there you can see if there's any error on part of your code. So yeah, this was the last part, and with this we finish our course on iteration. Thank you.